All right, guys and gals, let's do some railroading today. We're back in Run 8, and we're going to be running on a subdivision today that you're probably not very familiar with. More than likely, you may not have even ever ran it. It's one that I don't see a lot of people doing stuff with, but we're going to be running on the north end of the Jesup between Jesup, Georgia, and Waycross, Georgia. So it doesn't get the same kind of love as the south end of Jesup, right? Like there's two parts to Jesup sub. The northern end, which is north of Waycross, and then the southern end, which is south of Waycross to Folkestone, and people like that's the super busy route, right? Like tons of trains going that route. The north end it's not quite as busy. It's a little bit more old school. We're running the Q693, and I think we're set. I think we're good. All right, yeah, let's go ahead and let off the independent the rest of the way. We'll blast off, get out of here. So we're up at Ludowici. I think that place is a speed trap, right? I think there's something about Ludowici. I think it's a known speed trap. Maybe. It's a little heavy. 3,400 feet, not very long. We're going back once again to the early 2000s. If Spur does any kind of railroading on Run 8, especially in the southeast, it's probably going to be the early 2000s because it's just what I'm familiar with. It's what I know. I know it really well. I know the ops from back then. So definitely way more than I know what's going on now. I don't have a clue what's going on now. There you go. We're 6,200 tons, 3,400 feet. We, let's see what we are. 43 loads and 14 empties. So we're pretty stout. She's a little bowling ball, right? It should be a lot of fun, especially on the northern Jesup. I think there's quite a few hogbacks. Like it's kind of rolling terrain, typical southeastern terrain. Let's get her out of here. We had a clear back there. We're not running auto. I don't think auto knows how to route this train. It could, it may not. And I don't want to experiment with it, so we're just going to dispatch it ourselves. We're not meeting anyone. We're just like purely running today. I need to go in and like tell Otto like what these old school symbols are and where they go and stuff. I just haven't had a chance. Like I've got more stuff going on than I know what to do. Like there's not enough time in the day. Like I've got a bunch of old school trains that I've made. I've got more that I want to make. I need to set up the routing for it. I need to do a lot of things. At some point I would love to make it like publicly available to people if you want to get this stuff, but I just simply haven't had the time. I haven't had the time, unfortunately. All right, let's come out number 4. And we'll be on our way. Yeah, she's a little draggy. What's our HPT is 1.4. So that's pretty dang good. I mean, if we were a coal train back then, it would have been about 0.7, 0.8, right? So we're better than that, but it's still pretty draggy. This is, I'll have to pull it up. This is a Savannah crew taking it down to Waycross. Back in the day, they ran the triangle. Those guys ran all over the place. Like they ran Savannah to Waycross, Waycross to Jacksonville, Jacksonville to Savannah up to Nahuna, and then they had the other side like up towards Charleston, and then I think they went up towards Columbia. I'm not really like super familiar with that side of it, but those guys, they were all over the place, at least on the southern end. I definitely remember that. Like they could potentially, I want to say they could potentially be going for like several days at a time if they ran the triangle, you know. All right, she's doing good. She's getting on up there. Got those big tall pines, the yellow leaf pines. Coastal Georgia. Nice signal bridge ahead of us there, so you guys will get to check that out. I like the north end of the Jesup because, like I said, it is kind of an old school route compared to the south end. The south end saw a lot of upgrades. Got new signals, siding, you know, sidings lengthened, stuff like that. The north end is kind of untouched from the original installation. At least the signal installation, and a lot of that stuff I want to say they did like late 40s, early 50s, somewhere through there. And it's still the old searchlights. Like it hasn't, at least at this time period, in the early 2000s, it hadn't changed much. So you're looking at stuff that was probably 30, 40 years old and hadn't changed a whole lot at all. So that's the cool part about it. You're going to see some old signal setups, especially down around Jesup. Jessup's really cool. We may make this a multi-part. We could probably get to Waycross in 2, definitely 3. I would say 2 though. All right, we will look like we're a 50-mile-an-hour train. We got loads and empties. We're mixed. Someone asked. Let's go through some comments. I try to get to these when I can, but someone had asked the other day. You know, I'd mentioned that a lot of our coal trains back then was just 2 AC 4400s and about 85 to 90 cars, sometimes a little bit more, like 95s, somewhere in there. 90 give or take, we'll say that. 2 AC 4400s, about 0.7 HPT, depending on how the cars were loaded. And they ask if I ever experienced getting a lot of knuckles or stalling on those coal trains. No, I guess I was probably extremely lucky. I never had a bad experience on any of those coal trains, to be honest. They were always step on and step off. Never got a knuckle. I never had to replace a knuckle on a coal train. Never stalled. Never had it. I never stalled on any train. I'll just tell you straight up, never stalled. I know guys that did stall. I know guys that stalled on coal trains. I remember one night we had a coal train stall ahead of us. It was raining, of course, and they had the 2 AC 4400s, and it was a T-Series coal train. It was one to Boswick, and they stalled somewhere ahead of us, and I think another one of our trains that was like between us and them had to cut their power off and kind of push them up the hill a little bit, but I never had that issue. Coal trains were always really good. It's like I was saying in the comment when I replied, the power was always really good. The AC 4400s back then in the early 2000s were still pretty dang new. Like, they were still delivering new AC 4400s when I was working. I remember getting some that smelled like the fresh paint. Smelled just like fresh paint, like the cab. Brand spanking new unit, like, you know, only probably had, you know, less than 1,000 miles on it. What's our signal up here say? Got it clear. All right. So yeah, good power. Like, I never had a problem with the AC 4400s. I don't ever even remember one failing on me. Like, I remember one giving us, I remember 2 that gave us a locked axle, indication for some reason, and I don't know why they did that, because we actually watched it and it wasn't locked, but it gave us that indication. So I remember 2 different units giving that, but that's honestly like the only thing I could remember off the top of my head back then with AC 4400s that like problem. Like, they were, to me, they were some of the best engines you could possibly have. If you got a train with an AC 4400 on the head end, you were in for a good ride. If you had 2 AC 4400s, you're gonna have a good trip. Like, they just pulled like they were beasts. They pulled like no damn tomorrow, and to me, they were pretty reliable. The AC 6000 is the same way too. Like, I never, if I ever caught a train with AC 6000 on it, I never sweated it. Like, it wasn't even remotely a thought in my mind that, hey, this is going to be a bad trip because we're going to have problems. Whereas if we had a train with like a C30-7 or something like that, or a B30-7, B36, or oh crap. Like, this is going to be bad, right? Like, we're going to have a bad trip. Oh, it's spawning. It's got the auto spawn on. So yeah, I never sweated the hanging out on the tracks there. Nice. Never sweated the AC 4400s. Those were good units. So the coal trains were pretty nice with those on it. And I never had a coal train that had anything other than an AC 4400 on it. I remember seeing some that had the SD70 MACs on it and the SD80s from Conrail, but I don't think I ever had one of those as a leader. I think it was always an AC 4400 on those trains for me. At least as best I can remember. It's been a long time, so you have to bear with me. But yeah, those are good trips. Never had a bad trip. I know guys that did have bad trips. I know guys that stalled. No guys that got a knuckle. I guess I was just like totally lucky, right? Like it just wasn't a thing. What else was asked? How you could get hired now like I did back then. When I got hired out back then, it was completely different from what I understand. I don't think it's the same way. When I hired out in early 2000s, I had to go through a school called AMDG. And they did like the bulk of the initial training. You had to go to this school, you had to pass it, and then if you completed the school, and school was for 6 weeks, and you had to pay for this too. It was like I want to say it was like $4,500 for 6 weeks, right? So before you even went to AMDG, you had to take a test, like one of those bubble tests, right? One of those long bubble tests. And it was a personality test, and you had to take this test, and if you passed the test, then you could get accepted to school, and then you would go to school for 6 weeks. If you completed the school, and I didn't know of anyone that didn't complete it or didn't do good, like everyone passed, you completed the school, then the railroad would send a train master. Like you would put down what subdivisions, like what terminals you want to work out of, and at the end of the school, they would send a train master to the school, and they would kind of like interview you. And you know, they told us don't be guaranteed a job. Don't think you're guaranteed a job, right? Like if you complete the school, you may be just out of job. But I didn't know of anyone that didn't get a job by going to that school. So you go to this school for 6 weeks. It was a lot of classroom training and some field training. We go to these spurs there in town and like climb on freight cars and do that kind of stuff, you know. But like change a knuckle, we had to change a knuckle. Once you completed the 6 weeks and you did your interview, then you would get hired. And then I went to Jacksonville, Florida. I went down to the yard at West Jacks for like a week or two. I think it was a week. It may have been 2, but it was definitely at least a week. And we worked on this spur that came off the yard in West Jacks, and we just switched. We kicked cars, we hung off the side of cars. Like that's one of the tests we had to take, was you had to hang on the side of a car for so many minutes. Had to replace knuckles. We had a butt head. We had our own engine. It was like an MP15 or something like that. I don't know. And we had to just do very basic stuff. And it was that was for CSX then. Like we were hired and we were being paid. And our guys that trained us then were, one was from Conrail, one was an ex-Conrail conductor, and one was ex-Seaboard. So then once you did the week or 2 of OJT down at West Jacks, then we went to our terminal. You went to your terminal and you started working. You cubbed for, I want to say, gosh, maybe 2 months. Maybe we cubbed for about 8 weeks. Maybe it was less. I can't remember. It's kind of fuzzy, but it was a little while. But honestly, it wasn't like nearly enough. You know, like they would take you out of school and they would make you a conductor in a matter of a few months, and then have you mark up as a conductor. Whereas back in the old days, like you could potentially be a brakeman for years, working with a crew that are guiding you and kind of teaching you as you go, you know, as opposed to just like going to school, doing a little OJT, cubbing for a few weeks, and then marking up and be like, okay, well, you know everything about railroading now. Like you're a railroader, right? Like it was different. I don't know how they do it now. I know they had the Ready Center in Atlanta, and I think they started like CSX started hiring directly. Maybe like they got rid of the whole AMDG thing and they just started hiring directly. It's hard to say. I really, honestly, I couldn't tell you. how the system works now, or how it even remotely worked for other railroads, because they're all different. But that's how I did it back in the day. You know, you had to pay for it. All right, got to clear by Morgan Lake. Had to pay for it. I made the money back for that in no time. Like, I took out a loan to go to school, and I paid it back in no time. Like, within a few months of working, I had that paid off. It's part of it, right? Like, you basically bought a job, but it was all right. They did the best they could. You know, it definitely, like, you know, when I hired out and started, I did not feel like a railroader. It was like a deer in headlights. I mean, really, like, and I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of how it worked and what went down, but, you know, that will never replace the years of experience you could get as a brakeman the old way they used to do it, you know, where you hired out as a brakeman and you worked and then you finally made it to a conductor or whatever. Like, it would, it'll never replace that kind of experience. But I'd tell anyone, if you want to work for a railroad, love not being home. Preferably don't have a family. If you got a family, be prepared to be away. You know, like I said, but just love not being at home, because you're not going to be at home. Now, I know it's changed. You know, it's changed since I've done it. But that was a big part of it. And dealing with company politics was another big part of it. Like, your money, like having to keep track of your money and making sure that you're getting paid, and, you know, like, the company trying to skirt agreements and kind of be a little underhanded on certain things, you know, like, I don't know, you're constantly dealing with that kind of stuff. All right, got advanced approach at Doctortown. We'll get through up here real quick, and I'll go on about it. So I'll ramble on some more for you guys. All right, let's get ourselves some more lights. Where are we at? I'm lost here. Here we are. Yeah, we'll go through Jesup, and I'm trying to see where it connects up. Jesup sub to Waycross, Homestead. Is it going to be Offerman's the next one? I think it's been a while for me. I'm kind of confused a little bit, but we'll take that. Actually, no. Here we go. West Jesup. Now we got it. All right. All right, now we're set. So, yeah, like I said, be prepared to be away from home. Be prepared to deal with some politics. Be prepared to work a dangerous job. If you don't have your head about you and you mess up, you can get hurt. Like, you'd potentially killed. You know, that's another thing. So, I did it for a few years. I did it for about maybe 3 years. It wasn't very long. And I wound up getting another job offer that had me working Monday through Friday, like 7 to 3, 7 in the morning to 3 in the afternoon, with every weekend off, and I couldn't pass it up. Even though it was less money, I couldn't pass it up. I was newlywed. I got married when I worked for the railroad. I didn't get to have a honeymoon, because we got married right before Christmas, and I didn't even bother asking for time off, because I might could have gotten it. Like, you don't know until you ask, right? But they ingrain in you that, like, that's the busiest time of the year leading up to Christmas, and so I didn't even bother. I marked off for my wedding, and I marked back up the next day, and I was gone the next day. And we didn't take a honeymoon until a few months later is when we actually went on our honeymoon. We went on our honeymoon during the slow time of the year for the railroad. So, you know, it is what it is. I remember talking to old heads when I was kind of thinking about leaving. I was thinking about pulling the pin. And was talking to those old heads, and I remember them being like, you know, if you go to pull the pin, pull it now before you get too many years invested. And I remember one in particular telling me one day, I remember that conversation like it was yesterday. And he's like, you know, I've done this just about his entire work career. And he had, I want to say he had 3 kids, 2 or 3 kids. And he was basically like, I was there for nothing. He's like, I was never there for anything. He's like, now don't get me wrong. He's like, the railroad gave me a good living. It put a roof over our head. It put food on the table. You can't ever, like, you can't knock that. But he said, family-wise, he's like, my wife raised the kids. She did everything. He provided the income, but she ran the family and took care of the kids and stuff. He's like, I was never there for anything. So, you know, at the time, I didn't have kids. We didn't even know we would have kids at that point. But being a newlywed, it was definitely tough. And I'm glad now that I do have, you know, kids. I've got 3 daughters, so I couldn't imagine. You know, some people love it. You know, like, there are people that are just like, they are made for that type of thing. They're made for that type of lifestyle. I just, you know, I'll tell anyone, I love the job. The job was amazing. There's nothing like running through the countryside, riding a train, and seeing the backwoods of everywhere. And you know, I enjoyed the job. But the lifestyle and the politics sucked. So I hope that helps y'all out. I can't give you a lot of advice as far as how to get hired. One thing I can tell you as far as getting hired, if you're a rail fan, I don't have a problem with rail fans working for the railroad. I would consider myself a bit of a rail fan. Like, I'm not a diehard rail fan. I don't go out and like make pictures and videos and stuff. I don't have any desire to, but I like trains. I like any kind of machinery just fascinates me. But if you're a rail, like if you're a pretty good rail fan, and it may be different now, but when I hired out, you wouldn't let on that you were a rail fan. Just keep that to yourself. Because I think back then, they tended to steer away or stay away from rail fans because they wanted them more focused on doing their job and not trying to rail fan on the job, you know. So I don't know how that is now. Maybe it's different. They could embrace rail fans now and think, hey, they really love the job. You know, they could be the best employees we have. But yeah, I don't know. I would just be careful about that. Is one of the big things. I would be careful about that. But otherwise, yeah. Like I said, you know, some people are fit for it and others are not. All right, we're coming into Jesup. I'm gonna slow down for this 30 up here. See what she'll do. Yeah, she's slowing down. She's fine. This 30 always, honestly, kind of throws me off. I'm not sure about this 30 up here because we're taking the straightaway, the straight route. I know for sure the 30's in the curve, but I've kind of wondered, like, did they really do 30 on the straightaway? Because on the normal route, because I don't know. I'd have to get my timetable out and kind of study that a little bit. Look at the overhead, the cantilever signal, old school. That's old ACL signal. Like, that is like, it's probably original. I guarantee it's original. There's pictures of it. You go railpictures.net, you'll find pictures of that thing. It's long gone now, but back in the day, I guarantee it was original. The signal logic probably changed because ACL signals were a little different, but I guarantee that thing was original. Absolutely. Is there another crossing up here? Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think the speed's a little bit off right here. I think the 30 starts in this. I don't know if you can see where I'm pointing at in the curve right there. Like, you see the diamond board. It would start a little bit back. That's a, what does that say, a 50? I don't know. I need to look at that. It could very well be right. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at my timetable from back in the day, because that was part of our timetable. All right, well, let's count it off. We'll get out of it really fast. Anyway, I hope I didn't ramble about that too much. I just know, I guess, a question that I've seen a few times about getting hired and that sort of thing. So, someone else asked something to the effect of how many deer did you hit a year on average, cows, that sort of thing. Deer all the time. Deer all the time. Man, I hit more deer in trains than I ever have in a car. Like, it was all the time. And I want to say it's probably because they gravitate to the tracks because of spilled grain and stuff. Like, there's all the time animals on the tracks trying to eat, like, corn and stuff like that, you know, grain. So, we'd hit deer all the time. Like, I couldn't even begin to put a number on that. Cows, I never hit a cow. Never, at least not that I can think of. I never hit a cow. I don't remember hitting one. I do know a train that's on our line that hit a bunch. There was this little town, and there was a sale barn there, a cattle barn, and they had the sale, and like the next day, they were loading the cattle on a big cattle truck, you know, and they had left like the side door open or something, so they're running them in the back, and the cows were just going straight through and out the side door and then out, and they got on the tracks, and the train came through and killed like 11 of them. Hit like 11. There's a big herd of them. So yeah, it happens. I never hit a cow. No livestock that I ever remember. It was always like, it was deer and a lot of dogs. Yeah, dogs all the time. Dogs were pretty common too. And I don't know what it was. It's like a dog would get in the gauge and they would see you coming, and it's like those rails turned into a fence. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bump my microphone. That was probably loud for y'all. It's literally like the rails would turn into a fence, and they would start going down the tracks away from you, and it's like they were incapable of going back across. I don't know what it was about a dog, but like every time that we would have about a bad outcome with dogs is because we ran them down. Like it's like they had blinders on. I don't know what it was. Cats, on the other hand, like they would dart. Like, never hit a cat. They would dart across like they were a little lightning bolt, right? Like you never saw a cat get hit. Sure they have, but yeah, cats. Lots of dogs though. Dogs were probably, next to deer, dogs were probably the most things that we hit. And then I remember one trip we flew into a flock of turkey. There was a big flock of turkey on the tracks eating early one morning. We went through at like 50 mile an hour, and they took off and they started flying, and they started flying with us, and they were like right out, like right in front of us, just flying as hard as they could, and we were just hitting them, you know, just one after another, and you just see like feathers and stuff. And gosh, I couldn't tell you how many of those turkey we hit. Like, it was a bunch. What else? Vultures. Used to see vultures on the front end one time. One of the smelliest, stinkiest things that I've ever seen on a train was a dead vulture. A dead vulture. They hit it. It was on the tracks, and they hit it, and it got hung up in like the cut lever and the coupler and stuff, and like no one wanted to get it off. And so it was like plastered on the front of the plow and stuff. And yeah, it was bad. It smelled so bad. It was horrible. And your crew that hit a horse one time, and it was like not just your typical horse. Like, it was a high dollar horse. It turned out that they hit, and somehow it had gotten out and got on the tracks. And I don't know. Like I said, it was always deer or dogs for me. I remember one night we were going through this place called Waldo is where our tunnel was at, and it was always a really, really hard pull through there. And it was late one night, and we're running along, and we were only doing like 10 mile an hour. Like I think we were really struggling. It's like 2 in the morning. It was super late. And we came across these little hounds. And there were 2 of them, and they got in the gauge and they would not get back out. Like, and we were just creeping, like we weren't going very fast at all, and they wouldn't get out of the gauge. They just started going, and we debated stopping, but if we'd stopped, we would have never got started again. Like, it would have been a big deal. So we wound up running one of them down, and the other dog made it to a bridge, and it's like an open deck bridge, right? And so as we're going along, he's trying to run down this bridge in front of us, and his feet are like slipping between the ties, and he's like falling, and finally we went over him. So we go a little further down the tracks, and there was a dirt road that paralleled for just a little bit, and there was 2 4-wheel drives there with dog boxes on the back. And I told our engineer, I was like, we just killed someone's hunting dogs. I was like, they're out coon hunting late at night. And so anyway, there's another train right behind us, a piggyback. And I got on the radio and I called them. It was, I think it was a 183. I called them and I said, listen, I said, there's some hunters up here. I said, I think we just ran over both their dogs. I said, they may not be very happy, you know. So they're like, yeah, okay. So anyway, we keep going, and we finish our trip, and a few days later, I see the engineer of the train that was behind us on the piggyback. He's like, I want you to know, he's like, that dog on the bridge, he's like, y'all didn't hit it. He's like, his feet, all of his feet went between the ties, and he just went down on his belly, right? Just kind of dangling there. And what did that, oh, did we have a defect on that? Oh, no defects, okay. He's like, he was just dangling on his belly, like he couldn't get up. So we ran, like we went over him, but we didn't actually hit him because his feet slipped through the ties and he kind of went down. But yeah, that's one experience I remember. And then of course the human factor too. You know, I was very, very fortunate that I never hit or hurt anyone, and I thank God for that every day, that I didn't have to experience that, because we definitely had some super close calls. One in particular, I remember we thought we hit some kids. Some kids were running across in front of us, and that's like a whole other story in itself. But a lot of guys that I hired with, by the time I had left, had already like hit cars, or in some instances people suicides and that sort of thing. And so yeah, it's another aspect that you have to deal with that people don't think about. You know, you don't think about that. You think about the romance of railroading, but you don't think about that. And if you work enough years on the railroad, that's going to happen at some point. It's not a matter of if, it's just when. When is it going to happen? Like I said, I had several close calls that really, like, I just knew we had, and somehow it worked out where we didn't. But there's another part you have to be prepared for. So it's not all fun and games, right? Like, there's some serious sides to it too, doing that. So just give you guys a little insight. Feel free to ask questions. I'll answer them as best I can. You know, like I said, I've been out of the railroad for many years. Many years. So this is my kind of railroading right here. Armchair railroading. I love it. I'm doing pretty good too. Went by the DD. I was kind of worried about the DD because like I'm sitting here running my mouth talking to you guys and I'm kind of not paying attention. I grabbed a light set when we had to get some air back there, and like I don't know, we could have wound up stuck brakes with that. We lucked out, we didn't, but I meant to drag it on down to 10 and I didn't. At least I don't think I did. And as far as Run 8, I see people leave comments from time to time. I don't like how it's just a tunnel of trees. I don't like the tree tunnel, right? Like it's nothing but tree, like can't see anything, right? Like the scenery just stops. Dude, like anyone that says that, that's the way it was. I mean, I don't know how to tell you any different. It wasn't like you rode along and you saw these grand vistas on either side of the tracks as far as the eye could see or whatever. 99% of the time, at least on my railroads, it was through the woods. And it was woods that were so thick and dense and lush, you couldn't see 20 feet into them. Like, you couldn't see anything in the woods. Like, it was just like a curtain or a wall of trees and bushes and honeysuckle and kudzu and all this stuff. It wasn't a grand vista at all. And, you know, it was weird because, like, you would see nothing but trees and bushes during the summer, and then wintertime, the leaves would fall off, and you could see a little bit further back in there. And I know I said this before, like, going through a place that was an old settlement from the 1800s and going through there, and you could look back in there, you can see these abandoned gold mines, like, in the side of this hill, you know, that you can, like, you had no clue they were there during the summertime. And they were just a little ways off the tracks. So, I mean, you know, what you see is pretty dang accurate for how it was. You know, it's pretty accurate for how it was. And I've always been a proponent, like, why are you going to put in a whole bunch of other scenery that you, like, technically you should never see from the cab? All that's going to do is drag your system down. Like, your system is going to be processing a whole bunch of scenery that you're not able actually to see. You know, and if your system is working, like if 75% of your system resources is going towards scenery, then how are you going to have like 10 100 car trains on your map at one time, like 4,000 cars? It just ain't going to happen. Like, there has to be a choice made at some point. So that's pretty much the way it is. Like, this is pretty accurate. Thick bushes and lots of trees. Just like when you're West Coast, it's going to be desert. It's going to be a lot of desert, you know. And that's the thing I love about the Fitz is you go down to Fitz, it starts to turn into more and more farmland. That was absolutely accurate, like peanut fields and cotton and that sort of stuff. I thought we had a crossing coming up. Never mind. My bad. All right, got to clear North Screven, Q693. Try to come out of the power coming over the knot going into the sag, and then as soon as you start to come out of the sag, get back into power so you outrun your slack, right? Because your slack's going to be rolling down that hill and your head end's going to be slowing up, so try to outrun it a little bit. Now this one can say clear both ends of Screven. 693. But anyway, I hope I can help you guys out a little bit. I'm not, like I said, I tell you guys this every time, I was never a real life engineer. I was a conductor. Did get to run. I did get to run. Like I said, my group went to engineer school like a few months after I left. That was another deciding factor why I left. I love the thought of being an engineer, but I didn't want to start my seniority over. I hated the thought of doing that. So I did get to run some. some old heads, you know, just giving you like some tips and pointers. So at least you have some kind of an idea before you went, you know. But I was no means like a trained engineer. I know like very little about it. It's just what I doped out from the old heads that I rode with and like watching them. And a lot of the stuff that they did was probably considered no-nos nowadays, as far as like wiping the throttle and doing all these things, you know. It was a different time. It was more of an art back in the day, I think, than it is now. Like, it's very... Engineering nowadays is very scripted. Do this if you have this. Don't do this. Like, you know, it's like, don't touch the air. Don't you dare touch the air. The air would be the worst thing ever to touch. All right, we need to grab. Speaking of air, we need to grab a little bit here. She's getting a little faster than what I like. I give her up to like 3. 3 I'm comfortable with, but 5's a bit much. If it had been real life, I would have said something. I would have said something. All right, knock them off. Like I said, I can't tell you what it's like engineering in real life, but I can get you over the road in Run 8 and keep your train in one piece, right? I can get you safely from point A to point B. Yeah, that's the cool thing about it being a game. You get a lot of leeway to experiment and do what you want as far as running the train. If you want to run it by the book, run it by the book. Run it by today's book if you want to. It's not going to hurt anything. If you want to run it the way they did back in the day, then do it. If you want to completely disregard that, you can do it too. All right, let's see what the railroad looks like here. Hey, we're pretty well, yeah. We're pretty much clear. There's nothing going on for us. North Jessup back in the day was real freight heavy. I don't know what it is now, but that was like everything that, like, it was nothing but stuff going to the yard at Waycross. And if you notice, the sidings are a lot shorter on North Jessup. You know, they're like, what, 6,000 feet, give or take. They're not very long. The southern Jesup used to be a lot like this too, but they upgraded. Man, these hogbacks, I forgot about these. Uh-oh. Yeah, I let the slack run in. Did you hear it? Because I didn't bail my... I hit the wrong key. I didn't bail them off in time. We'll stretch break it. I remember hearing old heads talk about running piggybacks to Jacksonville and like putting 10 pounds under it and running number 8 throttle with 10 pounds under it, just keeping it stretched because they had a caboose on the back end, right? Like if you had a lot of slack running in and out, you could kill those guys back there. You could seriously hurt them. You could seriously hurt them for sure. So yeah, back in the day, what a big deal. Like it was encouraged. You had to. When you had a caboose on the bottom, you had to stretch brake. Like you had to finesse it. You know, you had to finesse it. Yeah, I don't think they teach the finesse anymore, really, so much. It's all about the dynamics, in and out of dynamics all the time, and that's just running, like, it's bunching and stretching the slack all the time, you know? All right, we'll go a little bit further and we'll call it. You get an idea of what the train's doing, though. That's just rolling train, right? Constantly rolling. It's what makes it fun, though. Gives you something to do. I don't even know what we're coming up to. I'm really not very... I've run this a few times. Not in real life. I've never been on it in real life, but... in-game, I've run it a few times. Not nearly as much. Like I said, it's kind of like... Oh, come on. There we go. It's just kind of neglected. Like, you don't see a whole lot of stuff going on with this route. It's just a slot freight route, you know? Like, it's all non-bonded sidings, you know, good restricting in. Medium or slow out. It's the old school sidings, the original setup that they had back when they signaled the line, and it's just, like I said, they run pigs on it now. I think they have a few pigs on it now, but, you know, they're doing that whole double track. Like, they're making it double track in a way because, like, they upgraded the line to Brunswick, so, like, it's directional running now, I think is what they were wanting to do. Right? I think Danny Harmon did some kind of video about that, like they're wanting to run them eastbound to Brunswick and westbound on the northern Jesup or something like that, like, so they won't technically have to put a lot of money into this route. All right, clear distance to Offerman. I can tell you now, the old school setup is the short blocks. There's Offerman already. Clear north Offerman. U693. Yeah, short blocks. Back in the day, the blocks weren't nearly as long. They were pretty short, you know, a mile, maybe a little over. You know, now, like, ideally, you're looking at 2 to 3 miles. So in other words, what I'm trying to tell you guys is if you're running on this route and you get an approach on the distant, you better put some air under it. Don't mess around and come out of your throttle and go into idle and then dynamics, because you're going to be up on the signal by the time you get your dynamics ramped up, right, and trying to stop. So you can go into dynamics if you want, put some air under it first, let the train start doing something, then go into dynamics. And if you're if you're slowing up really good and you know you're going to make it, then you can let go of the air, release the air, and just do the dynamics. But like on these short blocks, like there's no messing around. Like you need to take action as soon as you see it. No, big cat, no. Oh no, kitty. Oh, that's a MiG. That's a MiG over his head. Okay, it's the weirdest day ever. Oh no, he just fell. He just fell.